You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
This is Rod Mahood, your in-game voice of the Niagara IceDogs, and you're listening to the Dog Pound Podcast on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your podcast source for all game analysis, team interviews, and up-to-date news regarding the Niagara IceDogs.
Perlini! Overtime! IceDogs win! Hosing! Score! To Akil Thomas. Thomas has the angle coming in. He scores!
52.1 seconds to go. Do you love it, Niagara?
Welcome into another episode of the Dog Pound Podcast, the official podcast of your Niagara IceDogs, proudly brought to you by Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family. Visit any four of their great Niagara region locations. Brandon Caputo and Cam Halbert are with you on today's episode, breaking down the last month for the Niagara IceDogs for December of 2023. Happy New Year to everybody. We're now in 2024, and we've got a lot to discuss with the IceDogs. The upcoming OHL Trade Deadline is next Tuesday, January 10th. And we've got to go over, what we think the IceDogs might do heading into the deadline and some recent results that they've had, some players that are sticking out, and our fan polls as well. So, guys, make sure you're following the podcast on X at Dog Pound Podcast, and we're available on all social medias as well, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're doing a lot more on there as well, so go give us some love there. If you're enjoying the video version of the podcast, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and smash that bell. And to those listening today in on-demand audio, thank you very much for doing that. So with that said, Cam, let's jump into today's episode. And if you listen to our game recaps, which I should give a plug for those, after every home game, Cam and I record directly from the rink post-game with head coach Ben Boudreau, as well as a player interview, and we also recap the game as a whole. So go and check those out on our audio platforms after every game. The lineup, Cam, let's start off with that because it was an interesting lineup on Sunday for the IceDogs on New Year's Eve. A big 6-5 victory against the Guelph Storm, which they desperately needed after a couple of rough games. But and we pointed it out. It was something you mentioned right away. The three 16-year-old centermen were their top three centers. You had Ryan Robrick, Ethan Zada, and Ivan Galyanov, and even Andrew Vermeulen as a 17-year-old was the fourth line center. So the confidence that Ben Boudreau is showing in his young players right now, and he talked about it in the post game. It's very apparent right now what their goal is right now.
No, yeah, it's definitely to look towards the future, and we had mentioned in prior game recaps that, well, at least I've said I've loved to see Robrick at center just simply because of his size, and I think that eventually he'll probably end up there. But we'll have to wait and see. It's very difficult for a player to break in to the OHL as a centerman, as a 16-year-old, but Zada and Galyanov have done it quite well. They've been primarily centers for the majority. Zada has played a little bit on the wing as well, but Galyanov has pretty much been solely at center after his start there. But I think that it was again. I always go back to that Kitchener game and the quote by head coach Ben Boudreau just about there's no excuses no matter the lineup or the team that they're playing when they beat Kitchener with a significantly undermanned roster, 16-year-old centers, and they were able to take down Guelph, one of the best teams in the conference. So just a fantastic performance all the way around, and a really kind of a nice highlight to end not just the month of December, but 2023 with a focus on what's coming as opposed to, just kind of what's happening now.
And Owen Flores has continued to get the bulk of the starts in the net, Cam. Charlie Burns came in to relieve Owen Flores and Owen Sound, and the team just didn't play well in front of him in that third period, and Burns, unfortunately, gave up a 6th spot, but not due to anything that he did. It was just one of those games where the team just didn't have it, and Owen Sound really took it to them. So we heard Ben Boudreau in our last monthly recap talk about, talking to Flores' agent and saying, he's our guy. And they were going to really ride him until they were, mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. And while they're still, in the hunt here, they're just going to keep riding with Owen Flores, even 3-3s. It seems like he's going to be the guy moving forward, and he's got every single start here since Marcus Vandenberg was dealt to the Sudbury Wolves.
I mean, I think that if you take a look at like where the team is in the standings and how well Owen Flores has played, I mean, the first like month and a half, while they weren't getting wins, every game they were essentially in. Like if you go back and look at how many 1-goal losses this team has, it's pretty staggering, not including like empty netters and obviously. But Flores and Vandenberg did a great job as well, especially near the end of his tenure here before he was traded. But Flores is clearly going to be the starter, and I think that it just shows their commitment to showcasing him this year as well as next season. In his overage year, if he does happen to return. So, I think that it's probably the correct move as long as he says he can play 3-3. I'm blown away by that, regardless of what level of hockey you're playing at. It's 3 games in 3 nights. It's one of the crazier things about this league compared to like the NHL or AHL is that you play 3-3. So, just a great job by him all the way around, and he's really become a leader, like vocal. He is fiery. Like, I guess that'd be the way to describe him. He won't back down from, scrums, and even he will let his team know when they need to wake up, that kind of thing. And I don't think you always want a goaltender to be harping on their team, but, he doesn't do it always, but I feel like he does it at the right spots. And I think that he has been one of the bright spots of the team. And I'm really excited to see how he finishes out the year for sure.
And we'll discuss the updated lineup here, Cam, and that will be brought to you by the Niagara Employment Help Center, helping people find work in Niagara since 1983. Check out their up-to-date job board at ehc.on.ca to find your next work opportunity today. This was the last lineup against the Guelph Storm, so we can kind of talk about this a little bit more in depthly than maybe we would on the game recap. So the first line was Kevin He, Ryan Robrick, and Zach Lavoie. We heard Ben Boudreau in the postgame talk about we wanted to showcase, the future of this organization and put it on display in front of a big crowd on New Year's Eve. That was quite the quote from the IceDogs head coach. Kevin He and Ryan Robrick, they're kind of the cornerstones of the franchise as far as the future of it goes. Kevin He, the star rookie last year, and Ryan Robrick trying to break his rookie goal record this year, along with the captain, Zach Lavoie. What did you think of that trio there?
I think the quote was perfect, that he's going to put his best players, he's going to put them together. I think that the interesting part of the coaching change that he is aware of, and it's not like some sort of like tiptoed around thing, is that he is going to get run here. It is not going to be a situation where he's filling in, and if he doesn't perform well, then they're going to look elsewhere. Ben Boudreau is going to be the head coach for at least, I don't know what the time frame is, but he is going to get a longer run than the last Fitzgerald and Kuwabara did, simply because they tried when the ownership changed to get a Memorial Cup bid and make the playoffs, and it was kind of just trying to keep up, and all the moves were to just try and, okay, let's win a game, let's win the next game, as opposed to let's build something here. And the difference in the post-game interviews that you can hear is that Boudreau is much more candid, and I think that's because he's confident in his ability and his team, but he's also aware that he's got a little bit more run here, and he wants things to be built in the correct way so they can build sustained success as opposed to just trying to come close to a playoff spot. They're not going all out, and I think that that's a big important message change. And when he knows that, okay, instead of spreading them out and trying to make it a more, trying to tinker, he's like, let's just put our 3 best players offensively all in the same line and see how it goes. And it's gone really well, and I don't think you can argue with the thought process on that. And just to touch on some of the more offensive capabilities, if you unless you want to go through the rest of the lineup first, but Kevin, like, currently just he's got 19 goals. He's tied for 12th in the league in scoring. So he's really come alive. It's obviously he's got one of the best shots in the league. He is going to get drafted. I'm going to go on a limb here. He's going to get drafted, and that would be the first player to get drafted since Gushkin.
Yep, but he technically hadn't even
import.
He hadn't even played with the IceDogs before he was drafted. So
yeah, he was a European import. He was drafted, and then the actual NHL draft happened, and he was selected by the Sharks in the 3rd round. So yeah, he would be. That's a good trivia question for you off the top of your head. What was the last? Was it Akil
no,
or Tomasino?
It was Phil Tomasino in the 1st round by Nashville.
Yeah, because Ladnia was before him too. So it's been a minute, right? Like it's been a minute, and Niagara used to turn out some. If you were to go back and look at the alumni of the OHL teams, I think a lot of people will be surprised at the lineup the IceDogs would ice. Simply because there was a time period where they were just turning out first rounders. I mean, Jason Robertson is one of the best OHL alumni, and he was an IceDog, you know?
Yeah,
obviously,
but he was drafted
here. He
with,
was traded. But
Kingston.
Nonetheless, he was a part of the franchise.
Yep.
And on top of that, you mentioned Tomasino, Akil Thomas. You've got potentially one of the best, OHL D pairs in Pietrangelo and Dougie Hamilton. So
Vince Dunn, Ben Jones,
Carter Verhaeghe.
Yep.
Like there's a ton of great players that have come here, and and amidst all the off ice stuff that has happened over the last 4 years, the foundation has just been so shaky. And now for the first time, even when Coach Kubar was there, no disrespect to him, but it still felt like he was trying to just keep his head above water, even with some of the lineup choices, right? Like the coaching change to Boudreau does not feel like that at all. Like he is simply making it, okay, I know I'm going to be here for a couple of years. I'm going to make some roster decisions and lineup decisions based on I'm going to be here for a couple of years, which I think is the correct way to go, because the IceDog team clearly needs like a couple of years of a full rebuild as opposed to lofty expectations that were maybe above where they were. And you're seeing it right now. Like when they win and the team vibe, it's just so good, like it's so good that you would think that a team that, has the record that they have, it would just be, even when they win, it's like, whatever. It's not like that. Like the team being around the team that a lot of people don't see, it's surprising. And, Kevin is going to be a big cornerstone piece of that. And Rubric, all like everything aside, like we needed him to be a 2nd overall pick, like that, like legitimately, because if he is not what he is, that's a wasted season, essentially, right? And it was a hard season, and he has carried the pressure of that and being the number 2 overall pick. And he has been one of the best draft picks this season, and they've really nailed it. He's got a great shot. He has 107 shots on goal. He's first in the league among 16-year-old rookies. And just continue to impress as he gets a little bit more comfortable in the league. And you're starting to see it like physically. His forecheck is, I don't know what it is, man. I've talked about this in a couple of recaps. His ability to forecheck by himself is, I don't know how players turn the puck over to him, because he's hard to miss. And it's fun to watch. And as a fan, just media aside, as a fan, it's fun to have someone like him on the team, because we're going to follow his junior career. And, I would have to assume, again, nothing's guaranteed, but probably an NHL draft pick as well. And now you've got Kevin, now you've got Ryan, and your building blocks, and everyone around just kind of elevates their game because of that.
Yeah, and I think the important thing you mentioned there was Ben Boudreau. He has a long-term plan here, and he's going to be implementing it because he's got that runway that you talked about, and he's going to be able to make those decisions and have a long-term outlook, I guess, on the organization.
It's not a swagger, but it's realistic. The way that he interacts with us and media, as well as what he's doing with the team, it is realistic. He knows that he can't lose 40 games and expect to, keep his job. That's not what we're saying. It's just that he is going to be a big part of the team, and he's going to get his run. And I think that that's a perfect person to do. His coaching style is much louder than some of the past coaches that we've had. And, he holds his players accountable. I mean, we've seen it we've seen him give it to Kevin on the bench when Kevin has, not no matter how good of a player you are, you're going to have shifts or mistakes. Like it's a development league. Like that's just what's going to happen. And there's no one that is safe from, that kind of, accountability. And that's important because when the top end players feel accountable, then the rest of them feel accountable. And dude, every game, there's very few mistakes because for the first 2 periods of almost every game, it feels like a playoff game. Like every time, like all the games are close, regardless of where they are in the standings. And, it's fun now to see. That's the major difference from this year, last year. With the trade deadline passed last year, it was over. The season was over. There was very little hope in what we were watching going forward other than Kevin. And then obviously Isidore and Lavoie was actually a really fun storyline as the season went along. But we didn't know what the impact of them going forward would have been. Now it's like, we've got some really good pieces that'll be here for 3 more years. And that'll be quite interesting. And it's fun to watch them. Like Rubric going after and being the leading scorer among rookies, that's something we can watch and hope for and cheer for. And even in, the losses, if we're not going to be in a position to make the playoffs, that's something to look forward to. Same thing with Kevin, watching him in his draft year, just continue to pile up the goals. And my God, like some of the goals he scores it's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah, that one he scored in Erie, that was not many players in the league are going to be able to pick a spot like that with not a whole lot of room. So, Ben Boudreau putting his best players out there together on that line, and all 3 of them have over 100 shots on net. So that shows you that those are the three guys that are out there, putting the puck towards the net and getting the most scoring opportunities. We'll quickly run through the rest of the lineup, and then I want to talk about the power play a little bit. Brody Crane, Ethan Zada, Matthew Paris, those are 2 players that just recently came back from injury. We'll talk about them in some of the Twitter polls. We talked about Ethan Zada on our last game recap. Obviously, he scored 2 goals, and he's got 3 goals in the last 2 games, 4 all season long, so he's technically tripled his goal output for the season. Evan Klein, Ivan Galyanov, and Mike Levin. Klein, Galyanov, and Levin on the third line, and then Fedorko, Vermeulen, and Stewart. Fedorko jumping up to forward just because he has that versatility. He's played forward in London, but I know he prefers to play defense, but he's really taking one for the team right now as a leader, jumping up on forward while they're missing Bryant, Podolou, and Asadorian up front. And then on defense, Wysick, Podrekar, Daniil Sobolev, Bronson Ride, Ryan Van Netten, and Artem Frolov, and then the aforementioned Owen Flores and Charlie Burns. But Cam, what are you thinking about the forward lines? It would obviously look different if they had Bryant, Podolou, and Asadorian in the lineup, but they held their own for what this lineup was on Sunday night on New Year's Eve.
No, absolutely. Yeah, like the lineup would look far different because your top 3 centermen were literally out, right? And they were just filled in. Like Rubric had played wing the entire year. He moves over to center. Zada, again, would play wing on the majority, I believe. I would love to see the split. Because I know early on in the year he was at center, but down on the third line. So to have him, back at center, and then Galyanov's been really impressive over the last 2 months, especially since the coaching changed, because they just let him go, and he's just so relentless on the puck. He's a very, very fun player to watch, like super high energy. Again, the lineup is tough to judge simply because those 3 players that were out would 1,000% be in the lineup no matter what. But one thing I want to touch on with Zada is that he had such a slow start offensively. And in our last game recap, Coach Boudreau mentioned that and talked about him starting to get a little more confidence offensively. He has 6 points in the last 6 games, not just the goals. He has 6 points in 6 games. He's got 11 on the year now in 29. So again, he only had 5 points in his first 23 games. Him, Galyanov, and Rubric are now all in the top 18 in rookie scoring, right? So super impressive just from that aspect now that they're all starting to score, because those 3 will be here for 3 years. And I talked about it on the last game recap, is that the management's hitting on 4 of their first 4 picks last year is massive. Like, that's a huge win. And if they can do it one more time, this team looks drastically different, because next year, when if let's say the season plays out and we don't know what moves are going to be made, we'll touch on that in a little bit, just on the state of the team. But if Rubric, Gallianov, and Zada get like run and we just see them play at center, like that could be your top three centermen. We're all drafted in 1 year. Like that's impressive. Like that's tough to do. And then you go out and make your moves, in 2 years to see, that's how you make your supplemental moves. So that'll be interesting to see. But some of that doesn't get talked about enough. Is Paris? I find, I don't know why he always falls under the radar. He's quietly had a very good offensive season, especially for the IceDogs that needed it. But I think him and Levin are always just kind of compared because they came over from the same team and at the beginning of the year and roughly the same time. But Levin has that he'll fight anyone, which is so crazy because he's not a big guy, right? He just has that whereas Paris is a little bit more reserved. But he's been great as well. And Brody Crane definitely looks like someone that is bringing like a locker room presence. When we talked to him, he mentioned hanging out with Rubric, and it definitely seems like they've got like a good vibe on the team. And that's something that, again, you guys don't see. It's just like in the locker room, they all seem to be much more connected than past years.
Yeah, and Crane obviously coming from a great London Knights organization and knows what a good locker room is and knows what that team cohesion, what it takes to get to the OHL championship and be competitive year in and year out. So bringing in those guys I think is important. But the guy we don't touch much on because he's not the flashiest player and we don't notice him on some nights, but we always forget that Artem Frolov is a 16-year-old rookie playing defense right now. We talk about the three forwards up front with Gallianov, Robrick, and Zada, but playing defense in the Ontario Hockey League as a 16-year-old might be one of the hardest things to do in this league. And he's done a good job of it. Again, there's been a couple of games where, he's gotten, lost in the D zone earlier in the year. But those are the growing pains that he's working through as a young defenseman. But a guy that you don't notice on more times than on most nights because he's just so stable back there. You don't even realize that he's that young and that he's continued to build into a solid defenseman for years to come for this team.
To put it in perspective for people that might not have been paying attention, he has 8 points in 34 games. He is currently tied in points with number 1 overall pick Matthew Schaefer. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, but that just goes to show like how well he's done and how difficult it is. The first overall pick in the OHL, has 8 points in a few less games, but still, like, it is not easy to pile up points, and it's more about just not getting crushed in your own zone. And he has done a fantastic job. And I think a lot of that goes into the early on in the year where he was just paired with Sobolev. He's at Sobolev's hip, and that was a perfect pairing. Someone who is an NHL drafted player, will hit everyone, very physical and like just demanded the top competition.
It speaks his language too.
Exactly. Like it was just a very, very good fit. And I think that's very important for defensemen as they develop. But just by going off of rookie scoring, obviously rookie scoring is very difficult in the OHL as a 16-year-old. Frolov's 6th, so and he doesn't have a goal yet. I think didn't he have one that was taken away or tipped, I believe?
It was a tip.
I don't know if it was a tip, yeah.
Yep.
But nonetheless, he has been, we talk about the three forwards probably because they, again, more offensive, more flash. Frolov has looked great. And again, if you can get a top 4 defenseman in the draft in the 4th round,
second
third round. He was second round. I was mixed up him and Gallianov. It's just great, awesome job, and he definitely doesn't get talked about enough. He's going to be a big part of the team.
And lastly, before we hit the break, Cam, let's quickly talk about the power play. We talked about how candid Ben Boudreau is and how honest he is. At practice, they work on this all the time. Just trying to get quick shots to the net with a bunch of traffic in front, just to try to get those dirty goals. Work on anything they can. He recognizes and acknowledges that their last place in the OHL as far as the power play goes, they're at 10.2%. It might be a little bit different now. I'm looking at last game's media kit, but I mean, regardless, they're still last place in the OHL in power play, and that's got to be better if you want to continue to be a playoff team. I know their power play last year wasn't too bad, but I mean, every other aspect of their game, wasn't good, and it can be, a stat that you look at and say, it can be subjective, but at the same time, it's got to be better than 20th place. I don't care if it's, mid-pack or whatever, but if you want to be a competitive team, you got to be able to score on the man advantage, and just more times than not, they haven't been able to do that this year.
What do you think when you go to the away games as well? And I get to watch them on TV, so it's a little bit different. But What do you see from the power play that you think is the glaring thing?
I honestly think like they're trying too hard. Like sometimes, like I feel like because he has a way of putting the four forwards out there, maybe even five forwards when they had so many defensemen out, and when Podrekar was gone. But it's almost I can't pinpoint it, or else I'd probably tell them what I thought. But not that they care what I think. But regardless, like when I'm watching the power play, they try to set up Rubrick or Kevin Heath for a one-timer. But when they're working on it in practice, they're really just trying to force feed pucks to the net, get those guys at the point to throw it on net, have two guys standing in front of there to hopefully be able to pot that thing in. But when it comes to the games, it's almost like it changes a little bit, and sometimes they try to go, like we talked about, early in the year, they try to go top shelf, and it goes high glass, and it's out of the zone.
The thing that I think is the glaring, like when I watch, we London at the beginning of the year. That's a perfect example because they have potentially one of the best defensemen, like one-timers and slap shots in the league right now, in Sam Dickinson. But I think that they do not have a shooter that has a high level like slap shot, and so when they get it to the point, it's that's not to say that they don't have good shooters. It's just I don't know if any. I don't know when was the last time you saw a slap shot goal. I cannot think of one. Like probably Kevin, but it's their wrist shot that makes them so lethal. Even Zach, like his it's his wrist shot that makes it so potent. Yep. And I think that because if other teams are watching film, I don't know the last time that they took a slap shot from the point that had some. I mean, Sobolev has a decent shot too, but I just think that that's what they're missing, and that's hard to find. Like that's a very rare thing. But I mean, if you look at London's power play now, everything goes through Haltonen, and then Haltonen might have the best one-timer in the, like, I call him like Finnish Danny Heatley. Like he has a one-timer from the dot that it's not like Ovi. That's all time. But like it reminds me of Danny Heatley because it's coming, and it is just a cannon, and he brings his stick all the way to the roof, and it just looks funny because you can go watch highlights of him, and I'm starting to think that like, instead of they work it back to the point, and they do go back to the point a lot, like just make the point the right side and just feed Kevin. Like don't stop, and obviously players will, like teams can address that and things like that. And that might be their plan, all is what it is, because once you get in the game, it's completely different, right? But without that threat of a one-timer at the point or a slap shot from the point, you can just collapse all the way down and know that like that's not coming, and they're trying to get that perfect shot. And like you mentioned, I don't know how many times we've seen a shot go off the glass, and that's because they have guys that shoot top corner, and they have some great shooters. But when you miss, you go up. That's out of the zone. When you miss low, that's a rebound into the corner, out in front, like it's covered. But when you miss high, that's a other way more than often than not, especially with how hard they shoot it, because they do shoot hard. So that's just like a fundamental thing, and maybe that will come like if they get a defenseman or maybe one of the D-men that they have now starts to kind of let it go from the point. I'd love to see Bronson shoot a little bit more, because we don't see that, but they've been running five forwards, right? And that's the thing. Even when they put Kevin back on D, which we've seen quite a few, I believe he was on. I don't know if it's funny because I think that they put Kevin on the point on some of it, and maybe that was the idea. But even Kevin's slap shot isn't his strength, I don't think. Like it's his ability to just put his wrist shot wherever he wants. So I don't know. I think that's probably the thing that I see the most. But I'm not a coach or anything. It's just what I noticed. Early on in the year, it was they couldn't break into the zone. I think they've alleviated that. Their ability to break the puck into the zone is much better than it was the first month and a half or 2 months of the season. So I think they've really addressed that. But yeah, I would just everything low. Just shoot low, everything. And I think that you'll see a lot more ugly goals, and I think that would really increase their power play numbers.
Yeah, they're working through it, and again, like you mentioned, there's positive strides in certain areas of the power play. But again, Ben Boudreau will be the first one to tell you that they need to start, potting in those goals, because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Well, the other thing, too, is that the power play is a system, right? And you've got so many young players in the lineup, especially like when Zada and Rubrick are on the power play. Like there's like a delay in thinking on that for a little while, like while you're trying to make the perfect pass, make the perfect play. You don't want to clear the zone. And as they get more confident with the puck and their demand for it, like I think that they'll get a little bit better in that aspect, right? So we'll have to wait and see.
We're going to take a quick break on the show today. We're going to come back with more reaction to the IceDogs month of December. We've got our Twitter polls. We'll go over what we're expecting leading up to January's 10th trade deadline, what the outlook on the roster looks like right now, with the years of the players that they currently have. As well, we'll update the standings and just kind of look ahead to the next 5 games for the IceDogs, which will be on home ice. So stay right here. We'll be right back on the Dog Pound Podcast, the official podcast of your Niagara IceDogs, proudly brought to you by Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family.
Last year, more homes canceled cable TV than ever before. Why? It's just too expensive. For half the price of cable, you can get Fubo TV and watch the live sports and TV you love. Try free at FuboTV.com.
In the Niagara region, Global Pet Foods is your destination for premium pet nutrition and caring expertise. Whether you've welcomed a new furry family member or need advice on top quality nutrition, their dedicated staff is ready to help. Discover why Global Pet Foods' lesser-known premium brands outshine the big corporate names. Their team's passion ensures your pet's health and vitality. Check out one of their locations today: 3643 Portage Road in Niagara Falls, 160 Highway 20 in Font Hill, or 400 Scott Street and 344 Glendale Avenue in St. Catharines. Global Pet Foods, where premium brands and caring staff make the difference.
Niagara Golf Lounge features 2 state-of-the-art indoor golf simulators, allowing you to play some of the world's best courses all year round. The perfect place to indulge all season long. Don't worry about getting thirsty while you play around with your friends. Their fully stocked bar offers a wide selection of drinks, appetizers, and a variety of meals are also available to enjoy before, during, or after you play. Grab a seat next to the fire in their comfortable sports lounge. Didn't bring your clubs? No problem. They have partnered with TaylorMade to offer you the best rental clubs. You won't want to miss their exclusive NFL and NHL giveaways for the Buffalo Sabres and Buffalo Bills. Located in the Best Western Plus Karen Croft Hotel, 6400 Lundy's Lane in Niagara Falls. Visit NiagaraGolfVacations.com to learn more and to reserve your golf bay today. The Niagara Golf Lounge, Niagara's home for golf and sport all year round.
J&L Flooring is Niagara's specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride and provide elite customer service and support. With a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety of truly unique products, J&L Flooring is your specialty flooring and decor boutique shop. All of their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced, so you can feel good about your flooring choices. Their goal is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity. Offering a unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team, they simplify the process to make your life easier and to make your home more beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road in Niagara Falls or find out more at jnlflooring.com. If you think you can get a better deal anywhere else, you don't know Jack at J&L Flooring. Since 1999, Niagara Denture Clinic has been helping thousands of patients achieve natural-looking smiles with the confidence to show them off. Sean Battelle and his wife Anne, both licensed denturists, bring a wealth of skill and experience to the warm and friendly atmosphere to their Niagara Falls location at 5501 Drummond Road. And their on-site Niagara Hearing Clinic offers free hearing tests and a variety of services to fit your needs. This family-run practice takes pride in providing superior care and service to their patients, along with the best premium products available on the market. Get the best work done at a more reasonable price. Niagara Denture Clinic is here to help. Protect your teeth with a mouth guard, replace missing teeth, and get better hold with your dental implants. Call them today for a free consultation at 905-353-1552 or check them out online at NiagaraDentureClinic.com. Niagara Denture Clinic, creating natural smiles in the Niagara region for 25 years.
This is Alex Asadorian.
Hey, it's Ryan Roberk.
Bronson Ride.
This is Gavin Bryant.
And you're listening to the
Dog Pound Podcast,
the official podcast of the Niagara IceDogs.
Welcome back to the Dog Pound Podcast, the official podcast of your Niagara IceDogs, proudly brought to you by Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family. Visit any four of their great Niagara region locations. Cam Halbert and Brandon Caputo are with you, and usually on our monthly recap shows, we have a segment with the GM Wes Consorti, head coach Ben Boudreau, and captain Zach Lavoie. We are not going to do that because we are going to be recording another episode in a couple of weeks from now as a trade deadline fallout and kind of updating on the roster. And we'll talk to GM Wes Consorti and IceDogs head coach Ben Boudreau. It just made more sense to do that after the trade deadline. But we still wanted to come out here and give you guys a solid monthly recap for December. So with that said, Cam, they were 5-6 in the month of December and ending off 2023. They ended it off on a high note, obviously, with that big win against the Guelph Storm. But before we move on, out of the games for the month of December, they had some pretty big wins. They had that Kitchener win, that Peterborough win, and then the trade for Marcus Vandenberg happened. They lost 3 games in a row there. Then they went and beat the Ottawa 67s and the Kingston Frontenacs before losing a close game to the North Bay Battalion right before the Christmas break. And then they came out, obviously, with the game that they'll want to forget in Owen Sound, the back-and-forth game against the Erie Otters, and then finally that win against the Guelph Storm. So, what's one or two games that really stuck out to you from the month of December?
Well, definitely the Kitchener game, because that was, I think that's going to be one that these guys will remember and be able to and think back to, regardless of the situation, because it was an undermanned roster. I think there was like 12 forwards. Everyone was sick and hurt, and they beat the best team in the league. Yep. Like that's crazy to think about. And then obviously the one against Ottawa, in my opinion, at home was huge too. The 7-5 win against the 67s. Those are the two ones that's going to be. Peterborough was impressive as well. I'll be honest with you. The Guelph one was a great team game. Like, it was probably the most fun game that I've seen this year. There's a lot of good ones, but just the way that it was chippy. I just love that all these guys answer. Like, all these guys answer the bell for each other. And, like, as a hockey fan, that's like what you want to see, right? And they've done such a good job of that. And I'll be curious what happens after the trade deadline and how it looks. But again, I don't think we're in any uncertainty. There's a clear plan in place. They have 4 16-year-olds that will be here for 3 years, more than likely, at least after this one. After this one. And, there's finally some excitement in that and some future pieces. And that's not to say, like, you still have Lavoie and Azadoran and Flores and Bronson and all these guys. Like, there's still a long list. Like, as a fan, it's been much more fun to watch.
Our second segment today is brought to you by Wild Bill's Auto Repair, helping customers stay safe and confident on the road in Niagara since 2012 in honor of the late William Robert Hunter. Cam, let's take a look at the standings real quick and just update everybody on that. The IceDogs currently sit 11 points back of the Peterborough Petes, who have been slumping as of late. They obviously were going into a rebuild mode this year, but got off to a great start and have really faltered since then. 2-8 in their last 10, and they look to probably be sellers at the upcoming trade deadline, and they'll get Owen Beck back from Team Canada, who just lost a heartbreaker in the World Juniors to Czechia. So he'll come back and most likely be dealt at the deadline, I would assume. I heard the Sioux Greyhounds right now are the current leaders in that, but again, who am I to know that? Regardless, the Petes sit 11 points ahead of the IceDogs, but I would assume that gap would get closed. It's more so what Barrie decides to do, because Barrie right now is the other team that's out of the playoffs. They had an unfortunate injury with Bo Akey not being out for the season. It was a heartbreaking injury for the Edmonton Oilers second-round pick. And then Shala, who's now up with, I believe it's Czechia at the World Juniors, so they've been missing him as one of their best players. So if you're the IceDogs, and we're halfway through the year now, and they got to make up 11 points, they got to make up for the final playoff spot, and they're currently 6 points behind Barrie, who also have 3 games in hand on Niagara. So, Cam, as we talk about that, are you optimistic that if they can continue to pull out, maybe if they're playing 3 games, pull out 2 wins, or if they're splitting 2-game weeks, do you think that they could really find a way to get back into this thing?
They have a 5-game homestand coming up, and it literally determines the whole season. I'll be honest with you, I personally don't believe that the playoffs are going to happen again. Just as even if you like let's say they make up 10 points, that's 5 wins, but everyone else above you has to lose, right? And they only need Peterborough essentially and the Colts to lose. And so maybe, but I would be stunned. Like they're gonna play Owen Sound on the 5th, and like it won't be a 10-2 loss. If they can win against Owen Sound, they play Windsor, last place in their conference, Barrie, right above them in the conference, so the other team that's out of the playoff spot. They play Flint, who is third last in their conference, and then they play a really tough game against Mississauga. So, like, if they can win 4 of these 5, it'll be interesting. But I just. It is not like last year, because last year was in the same situation. We're last at this point of the season. But it's about developing now, like in building towards next season. I think the trade deadline is probably going to be showing that, or a proof of that. But we'll see if they can beat Owen Sound. Like, it'll be pretty interesting. Like, it will be, because there's a potential chance to go on a nice 4-game win. What was the last time we won 4 games in a row? 2018, 2019?
Probably.
Yeah. So you never know, right? And the team plays so well, like so consistently. And but it's a 4-game homestand. Essentially, like they play so much on the road in the last 20 games of the season. Like, it's a staggering amount because they played so much at home already. And they always play pretty well on the road. So who knows?
And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to write them off yet, but again, the moves at the upcoming deadline might, like you said, show that they're more so going for a long-term outlook. But I think it would still be important for them to maybe sneak in that 8th spot, because gaining that experience of being in the playoffs would be huge for this young group. And I think they're going to do everything that they possibly can to try to sneak into that last playoff spot, even if you go up against an Ottawa team or a Mississauga team, because that's going to be valuable for them going into next year, that hopefully they'll be a higher team in the as far as seeding goes. I would really love for them to be able to sneak in and just gain that experience for this young group that they haven't really had in 4 years now.
I mean, man, if they are able to make the playoffs, like, that's like not even for the team, the city, like the fan base of Niagara is one of the best. I know that every team says they have the best fans, but like, they show up, like, regardless of where they are in the standings. Like, if they're able to make the playoffs, like, that is massive. Not to mention, like, if they were to make the playoffs, they're playing playoff hockey the whole way through. And I think that maybe something interesting about the trade deadline is not so much like selling everything, but it would go a long way to show not selling a lot, Like that's also something. Like, a lot of teams, like, where they're kind of fringe playoff teams and they buy or they don't buy, and that kind of is an indicator. And usually teams that don't buy at the deadline or have any additions, they kind of just falter, because it's like, in the locker room, it's like, we didn't get any help, and that kind of looks rough. Not trading a lot of the pieces away, because the draft went so well this year. Draft picks are so hit or miss, man. Like, they are. They're like, obviously they're so important, but if you look at like London, like, yes, they draft well, but they just go and get whoever they want via trades, right? So it's not like they all just rely on the draft, right? So to maybe hold on to Sobolev and hold on to some of the overagers, right? Like, that's an interesting thing, that would go so far in that locker. I guarantee you,
And
we'll have to wait and see.
They've got an OA spot open, and I believe the OA deadline is a day before the trade deadline, so you have to have your overagers locked in. I believe it's a day or two before the actual trade deadline on the 10th. But looking at the outlook of it, they're going to have 7 overagers next year: Owen Flores, Ryan Van Netten, Zach Lavoie, Brody Crane, Evan Klein, Gavin Bryant, Mike Podolou. So obviously you can't keep all those guys going into next year. We're not going to talk about specific players because that'd be unfair, but just talking about the numbers themselves. I mean, you would expect that if moves were made, maybe an 04 gets moved out just because they would have 7 next year. But regardless of that, if they do decide to make moves, I think, Ben Boudreau's still going to continue on with his plan here, and then that's not going to change after January 10th. I think he's already basically planning for if moves happen, because we saw what the lineup looked like without Asadorian, Brian, and Podolou on there, and he's relying on all these young players and everybody else stepping up too. I think that's important that, it wasn't just those guys, but everybody else kind of hold their own. Andrew Wysick scored the OT winner, and he's been, one of those players that we looked at to continue to get better. And I really, trust that, this team's going to remain competitive down the stretch. I don't think that if they move 2 or 3 guys that they're going to, just be completely non-competitive, because, they've shown that they can have upwards of 8 or 9 guys out of the lineup and still take down a top Kitchener Rangers team.
That's like the coaching staff and the new team mentality. Like, I 100% agree. Like, I don't think that even if they trade it away, and again, I think that the smart money is to probably get as many assets as you can. It always is. Like, if they feel like if they were to lose to Owen Sound and Windsor, and now they're 14 points back, let's say, then obviously the playoffs are probably a statistical nightmare. But that doesn't mean that this team is not going to compete, because we've seen it every night regardless. And the other thing to mention is that, like, in the OHL, like, the reason why it's fun to watch CHL hockey in general is because everyone is playing as hard as they can at all times for the most part. It is not like there's guaranteed spots and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, they are all going all out. And I don't think, could you imagine if someone kind of, just kind of, coasted what head coach, Ben Boudreau would do? Like, that person's getting benched for 10 games. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think, like,
he wouldn't let anybody mail it in. Absolutely
exactly.
Not.
So I'm not worried about. Like, if they don't make the playoffs, I don't think it's going to be a thing where we see 10-0 losses every night, like it was last year. That is not going to be the case, because everyone's going to be fighting for spots next year. The interesting thing, though, you listed all the overages for next year. They don't need to be moved right now.
No.
And on top of that, like, I know you don't want to mention anyone, but, like, Zach Wall is the captain. It'd be very surprised to see him go, but everyone else, like, they're going to be shown and put into spots because they're not going to, give up a chance to win games. They're going to put the best lineup out there. If you want to highlight some of these guys to be put into better spots and put up more numbers, it might be better to, like, let them cook in Niagara for the rest of the year, and then in the offseason make your decisions. I don't think it's the overages this year is what I'm more alluding to, and I'm more curious the deadline as to what happens, because obviously if you keep them, that's it. You're not getting anything for them. But the overages that are going to be overages next year, like, there's still an off season to move them, and we know how active in the trade market that that Jim West Consorti is and ownership is. So it's not like they're not willing to make moves in the off season. So I'd be like what I mentioned. I think it would go a long way to not trade a lot of those guys next year at the deadline, to show them that, like, hey, we might be in last place right now, but we're not just selling everyone off for spare parts. And I think that would be a massive thing. And then deal with the issues in the offseason. Let them finish the season that they've had, because, like I said, man, like, they've won huge games against, like, we're not talking about winning against Windsor. They beat Kitchener. Like that's crazy to think about. So, no, I'm more curious to see what they would do with the overages this year. And, just talking about, like, yeah, we want to mention it specifically. Like, Federico's from here, right? Like, that's a good story. He wants to be here. Like, so it'd be interesting to see what'll happen. And again, it all depends on what the players want too. Again, it's not just, it is a business, but what the players want matters a ton.
It's a developmental league.
Exactly. So if there's overages this year that want a shot at the playoffs, obviously they're going to do what they can to help facilitate that, right? Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I'd be curious to see about the next year ones. I don't think I think it would go a long way to not move them.
Yeah, and plus there might be more options for more teams to get involved in the offseason. Their teams might be filled right now, but it might give them more options and opportunity in the offseason when teams are trying to fill out their rosters, because they're probably for the most part filled out already halfway through the year. So, Cam, before we go, I want to talk about the Twitter polls, and guys, make sure following us at Dog Pound Podcast. We try to put out polls for these episodes that we do to give you guys a little bit of input and have that interaction with what you guys thought. So the polls will start off here, and I got them up on the video version. If you're following along on audio, you can pull them up on our Twitter account at Dog Pound Podcast. Which IceDogs player has impressed most by taking the biggest step forward in the past month? Ryan Robrick, Kevin He, Andrew Wysick, and Ethan Zada. and it was actually a tie between Kevin He and Ethan Zada. Ryan Robrick in third place, and Andrew Wysick. But interesting that Ethan Zada, and again, I think you mentioned this a lot, with recency bias, he scored 3 goals in the last 2 games, and Kevin's obviously been on a tear too, but all 4 of these guys, in my opinion, have really made positive strides, and for the successes that the IceDogs have had with the wins, these guys have been big parts of that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the thing to remember is that Kevin having such a good month and scoring a ton, it's not like it's unfair to be like, that's expected, but like, that's expected. He's now having the season that we all kind of anticipated and himself thought he would after a slow start. So I think that like that's probably why it went that way. But I personally would think like Zada being offensive is so big for the team, because I think that I've mentioned this a number of times throughout the game recaps that he is going to be a fan favorite. He will get into everyone's grill. He's already fought multiple times. Well, at least once I can think off the top of my head, but he doesn't back down from anything. Plays very good defensively as well. And it was just offensively that was what was kind of missing from his game. And, if he can put up 40, 50 points, like that's a massive thing to add to your team as someone who looks to be like your top 6, center.
No, absolutely. And I look at the second poll here, which IceDog player has made the biggest impact since returning from injury: Brody Crane, Matthew Paris, and Andrew Vermeulen. Matthew Paris takes it at 58.8, Brody Crane in second with 29.4. But just having all those guys back in the lineup has just been like a breath of fresh air, and I feel bad for the other guys that, have been in there all year and having to play under man, but, it's almost been like an injection of just more talent into the lineup, which obviously with these talented players coming back, but it fills out the lineup in a way where it gives the coach Ben Boudreau more options, because he's not just riding with the same 2 lines and a bunch of call-ups, trying to piece together a 4th line or even sometimes a 3rd line with only a couple of players or some call-ups or what have you, but I just think like having guys like Paris and Crane around, and Vermeulen being able to fill a bottom 6 role, like it's helped the team just in all aspects, and it's just been nice having those guys back in the lineup and not looking at our pregame lineup sheet and having it filled with a bunch of scratches on it.
I mean, absolutely. When was the last time we saw a full lineup? Okay, it's just tough. Like, I don't know a team that we'd mentioned this in the show. Like, what other team in the OHL has to put 3 16-year-old centers as their team? But it went great, right? It's just that, that's extremely tough on the guys that have played all season long, and you can't do anything about injuries. They're always going to happen in hockey. It's a brutal sport in that aspect. And they've all been great since coming back from injury.
And lastly, which IceDogs player will make the biggest impact upon their return to the lineup? Gavin Bryant, Alex Asadorian, and Mike Podolou, the 3 centers that we mentioned earlier in the show that have been out. Gavin Bryant takes that poll 60%, Alex Asadorian and Mike Podolou close second and third there. But, if they are to get all 3 of these guys back, which is hopefully soon, I think that would, like, where would they slot in? Maybe Rubrick goes back to the wing. Maybe Zada goes back to the wing. But they played so well, and at least they've shown Coach Ben Boudreau that while their top 3 centers have and are out, that these guys can fill into those roles when needed for maybe short stints. Again, keeping them there for the whole year, they might start to go through some lulls in there because they're such young players. But it just shows that he has the flexibility to be able to move these guys around, and that's big as a head coach, to be able to know that you have the confidence in these guys that as young players, they can step into those big center roles when you're missing some of your big guns like Asadorian, Bryant, and Podolou right now.
Well, no, absolutely. Like it's crazy because like now since that game, like the one against the most recent against Guelph, like I just want to see like Rubrick at center, because it went well, right? And it might not continue to go well, but the reason why I think like the most impact coming back, Gavin Bryant's so good on the faceoff dot. Like I think he's got to be the team's best faceoff man, and definitely like a leader. The thing that is the most unfortunate is that Podolou seems to be dealing with some injuries over the last little while, and like the last month of the season, his start was so dominant. Like he was by far the biggest and most improved player for the Ice Dogs. Like to be honestly, the first month and a half of the season, if you watched every game, it wasn't even close. Because what we got after the deadline last year, it didn't seem like he would be a fringe player kind of thing, and he's huge and he played like he's fast. And
he's so fast.
Yeah, and a great power forward. Like it was stunning to see that come out of there because we didn't expect that at all. At least I didn't. And obviously the injury was tough, and he has such an impact. I mean, he started as like the third line center, and after like 4 games, he was the first line center for the majority of the season. Like until up until like injuries and things like that. But we'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. The other thing about Zada, like, and I want to hammer home this point a little bit. That how good he has been, because Rubrick is obviously going to get all of the attention, and Galyanov made a lot of noise, and just the way he plays it's noisy. Zada on a team that has a minus 42 goals against stat, so they've given up 42 more goals than they've scored. Ethan Zada's a +3 as a 16-year-old, and that plus minus is a very just mess stat to look at, right? But they're saying something that he's the second on the team. Sobolev is a +4, which is even more crazy to me. Just because, like, how hard is it for a defenseman that's playing as much as he is? The fact that he's a +4 is nuts. But like the fact that Zada as a 16-year-old is a +3 on a team that is last in the league right now and a minus 42 goals against is just if he, like I said, he starts scoring. And that is massive. And not to mention, like, we talk about Rubrick being big. Like, he's 6'2" as a 16-year-old. Like, Zada's 6 foot. Like, when we did the game recap, when you go down, you see these guys, like, in the locker room and whatnot, like, in the hallway, when you're in the media scrum and whatnot. Like, he is big. And, when you see that guys get drafted, they fill out. Like, that's not, as a 16-year-old, you got more growing to do. And they could have a really big, talented center core that is just really exciting. It honestly is. It's very exciting. So we'll have to wait and see there. But I just want to give Ethan a little bit more love there, too, because he's quietly put together a fantastic season.
Yeah, and I'd love to see, because we talked about it, how good it was last year to see that Kevin He, Alex Asadorian, and Zach Lavoie line, they really gelled at the end of last year, and we haven't really got to see that on full display this year. When Asadorian does come back, did they put them together? We'll see. Again, we're not coaches, so we don't know what the best line combinations are. We just kind of talk about what we see here from this side of it. But Cam, before we wrap up, just general thoughts. We got a 5-game homestand coming up. We're going to be coming back to record after the trade deadline. We'll have GM Wes Consorti, head coach Ben Boudreau, to talk about any moves that are made and kind of where the outlook of the team is going to be for the rest of the season here as we finish off the last 30 games or so. But, 5-game homestand coming up. Big opportunity here for the Ice Dogs to, showcase on home ice what they can do. And hopefully we start to see the Meridian Center, like it was on New Year's Eve, have a really solid crowd and get behind this young, exciting team.
I think it's like it's kind of set perfectly where, for whatever reason, they have beaten teams where it just would, like, the betting lines would have been nuts. They kind of are a letdown against the teams that you think that they should win. They've had those letdown losses. And the fact that they're going to have a very tough game against Owen Sound, but you got to be, like, this team will be angry after that 10-2 loss, because that was brutal, and the score did not reflect the game, and the third period just got away from them. And it's a winnable game. Like, Owen Sound is 7th in the Western Conference. The Western Conference is so good this year, though. Like, it is dominating the East and West matchups. That said, if they were to win that game, and then you go into 3 straight very winnable games against Barrie and Flint, like, I would love this team to go on like a 5-game heater and get within like 6 points of a playoff spot. It just, because I would love to see them excited all the way throughout.
The confidence throughout the
just
team.
As a human aspect and a fan of the team, right? Like, as we have more access, obviously, and you see these kids, and like, you just want to see them do well. And man, I was losing it when they won in overtime, much like they were. So I want to see more of that.
Absolutely. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about a lot more stuff with the Niagara IceDogs. Guys, make sure to check out our game recaps that we'll have a lot coming up. Next 5 games, we'll have game recap right after the game. That's usually released the morning after. So basically the midway point of the season for the Niagara IceDogs, and we'll see where they go from here. But again, there's a lot of positive things to take away from what we've seen from them as of late against some very top teams, and look forward to coming back. So for Cam Halbert, my name is Brandon Caputo. Make sure to follow the podcast on X at Dog Pound Podcast. Thank you to those today watching on video version on YouTube. Thank you very much for that. Hit like, hit subscribe, smash that bell if you enjoyed the episode today. And thank you to those listening in on-demand audio today. Go give us some love on whatever audio platform you choose to listen to us. So until next time, this has been the Dog Pound Podcast, the official podcast of your Niagara IceDogs, proudly brought to you by Global Pet Foods, where pets are undeniably part of the family, on the Armchair GM Sports Network, and we'll talk to you again very soon. You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.